Hello, this is the weekly horoscope forecast from Chronos, the astrology site with real stars. Let's start with the first half of July, from July 1st to the 15th, 2026. Since there's such a major configuration between August and September, June and July are quite ordinary rather than just being a passing time. They're just normal. However, right at the very end of June, specifically on the 29th and the 30th, Mercury's retrograde station occurred, and there was an important transit of Jupiter moving into Leo. And then, as we move into the month of July, there are actually a few more things like that happening to consider as well. Both Mercury and Saturn are entering their important stations, and because of that significant configuration, how should I best find the right way to put this for you? It's not exactly a weak or quiet period, but since August and September are so heavy and intense, it can still be seen as a relatively normal period before that peak hits. The first planetary configuration we see is Mars gradually moving into a significant conjunction with Uranus within the night sky. This is the overall structure happening on July 4th, and it will be in effect from July 2nd to the 6th. During this time, you might generally struggle with issues related to electricity, telecommunications, or minor software and app errors. The probability of accidents involving vehicles is at its highest when Mars and Uranus form this hard aspect. So while those are the general and common aspects we usually see, there is also something very specific and unique about this Mars-Uranus conjunction that is happening right now. A small disagreement that could have been settled quietly at a lower level might reach the ears of upper management. It's not just a manager or director, it goes all the way up to the CEO. Because it impacts individuals in such high-ranking positions, matters that would typically remain hidden can quickly blow up, and the people involved might end up facing significant consequences during this period. Three days later, Neptune? Oh! Oh, I went backwards. Yes, the hour mark appears like this. Sorry, I got mixed up with the dates. Now, Neptune begins to slow down quite significantly, until it eventually reaches its station and officially begins its turn retrograde on July 7th. So we can see this as a configuration that's active from July 2nd to the 12th. Now, in a way, this is also a structure that connects back to the Mars-Uranus conjunction from a few days prior. Unexplained breakdowns or malfunctions in various equipment can occur, and usually these things happen quite suddenly without any prior warning. Things like this can lead to major problems, because you don't know, it's unexpected, and it's not that it suddenly happened while you weren't looking, but rather that laws, rules, or terms and conditions have changed without you realizing it. And you might have even agreed to them without even knowing. You had no idea. Then only later. At the very moment it starts to negatively affect your personal interests, you find out and think to yourself, oh no, this is bad. You could easily end up losing a significant amount of both your valuable time and your money. It feels like a total waste of time when these terms change, but you really need to carefully review the fine print. Otherwise you will certainly pay for it later on. You really truly will. This is also about one person trying to deceive another, but their method is so transparently obvious and naive that, in the vast majority of cases, it ends up as a completely failed attempt. And those people around them might begin to criticize them, openly questioning how they could be so blatantly shameless. Now, on that same day, Mars meets Prima Hyadum in the Hyades cluster. This happens on July 7th, and its influence lasts from the 6th to the 8th. During this time, you might push ahead recklessly without a plan. But then, like a blind squirrel finding a nut, you could unexpectedly end up achieving something through a series of rather absurd coincidences. Well, as long as the final result is good, that's what matters, right? Also, since the Mars-Prima Hyadum combination is a classic astrological indicator of ADHD, individuals who are already living with this condition might find their symptoms becoming more intense during this period, for no apparent reason. And there are various other similar examples too. Certain combinations are known to symbolize specific illnesses. For example, there are simply so many of them to count. Well, looking at the broader picture, whether we are discussing the complexities of clinical depression or the symptoms of schizophrenia, it is important to note that Castor, for instance, serves as a primary example that is very closely linked to the development of schizophrenia. And the star Skeet is strongly associated with deep depression. Furthermore, there are also other specific stars related to bipolar disorder. Consequently, various patterns of mental illness in humans can be found to be highly correlated with these specific fixed stars. You can think of it that way. Now, on that same day, July 7th, there's a lot going on. Who does Venus meet on July 7th? It meets Alphard. It meets Alphard, which is quite a significant star. Bill Clinton became famous because of this star due to the Lewinsky scandal. This configuration is active from July 7th to the 8th. During this time, there is a bit of an unbalanced romantic relationship. One person likes the other a lot more. The other person doesn't feel the same way. So it's a kind of inequality where the level of affection isn't mutual, it's not two-way, but rather tilted to one side. Because of this imbalance and inequality, various discords or awkward situations can arise. Situations that cause emotional pain and heartache can occur. And also, when Alphard meets Mars or Venus, it can lead to a bit of a contrary, rebellious mindset. So, because the people around you strongly oppose it, you might impulsively do something you wouldn't normally do, making the whole situation even worse, though you'll likely regret it later on. In most cases, those specific kinds of things can definitely happen. And the next day, as Mercury moves, it meets Pollux, the beta star of Gemini. This happens on July 8th. This structure is active from July 7th to the 9th. During this time, troubles related to wages, welfare, or employment contracts, mostly sixth house matters in astrology, can lead to conflicts, disputes, or friction. So, if an unexpected problem arises now, it often escalates into a legal matter. It can lead to lawsuits, sending legal notices, and instead of just complaining, people are much more likely to take direct legal action. Additionally, issues with your extended family or relatives might cause conflict with your parents. For instance, they might say, "Hey, your nephew is visiting, so stay with him for a week and look after him." But you are incredibly busy, and he is not even a nephew you are close to. You barely know him. That would be a bit of a very awkward situation. But usually these types of important family matters are already decided by the older generation. So if you refuse to comply, it makes your parents suffer a significant loss of face and social standing. Anyway, it would be much better to have an open and honest discussion about it beforehand. But since the older generation often just gives direct orders to the younger ones, serious conflicts and misunderstandings frequently arise from this rigid traditional hierarchy. And on July 10th, Venus meets Regulus in the South Node at the same time. Now, Regulus is at 0 degrees Virgo and how many minutes was it? 12 or 13 minutes, anyway, around there. Venus meets Regulus and then immediately meets the South Node. Of course, the South Node would have met Regulus first. This structure is active from July 7th to the 13th. During this time, you might witness incredibly rude behavior and think, "Wow, how is this possible?" Or you could even be the target of it. Now, if this happens to you, you might get angry, but you'll probably find it quite bizarre first. Wow, I'm actually experiencing these kinds of things in my life. It's not pleasant, but it's strange. You know what I mean, right? Something quite unusual and somewhat shocking could happen. Like suddenly getting cursed out by a kid who's 50, maybe 50 years younger than you. It is exactly that kind of thing. Now, and at this time, whether they're capable or not, there are people in organizations or groups who are disliked, arrogant, only care about their pride, and think they're so great when they're actually not. If you were that great, would you be hanging out here with me? Probably not. Yeah, but strangely enough, there are people who try to boost their own ego through the people around them who are similar to them. or there must be some kind of issue. Maybe they were born with it, or they had some deficiency growing up, and so on. But you shouldn't try to fill that void through society. You have to deal with it on your own. So individuals who behave in such a manner might encounter significant public criticism within a group or organization, and ultimately find themselves being excluded or officially ostracized. Ostracism usually happens implicitly, but around July 10th it could actually become a real and official exclusion, almost like being told that you are no longer allowed here. Like, we can no longer do business with this person or this company. They're being formally weeded out like that. In our group, our negotiations, our professional league, or our association, we will no longer be doing any business with company ABC. Like that. It can be a very painful exit after being publicly called out. So at this time, Venus and Regulus is a bit closer to being a malefic star, even though it's a royal star, and it's quite incompatible with Venus. But it even meets the South Node. In the midst of all that, oh, it's no joke. So, it's better not to start anything that requires negotiation or persuasion, assuming you can actually communicate with the other person. It's a very unsuitable period. You need to keep that in mind. And just 3 days after that, Mercury continues its movement to meet Castor, the prominent alpha star of Gemini. This configuration is active from the 12th to the 14th. Right now, this is actually a very good time for things like detailed content planning and strategic mapping or brainstorming, where you can freely generate a wealth of new ideas without being tied down by any of the usual standard conventions or rules. It's not simply about meticulously planning and executing tasks sequentially, but rather a period that is perfectly suited for the process of creating something truly valuable and high value from scratch, using nothing more than your own unique and original ideas. And it's not just simple idle daydreaming. It's about using a powerful imagination that's almost like a delusion, which actually helps in discovering a viable path forward. So, truly brilliant things often come from the realm of delusion rather than just mere fantasy. Someone once said that a delusion from 10 years ago is today's brilliance. I wonder who exactly said that. Anyway, depending on the specific era or the surrounding environment, what seems like a delusion could actually become a highly successful and profitable business idea. But when? This is especially true when Mercury and Castor meet. And on that same day, Mars is meeting with Aldebaran, now the royal star of the East. Alpha Tauri. It's close to a benefic star. Now, this is a configuration active from July 12th to the 14th. And during this time, it's a period where you can aim for a big win even if you risk some loss, a time to go for it and take a chance. You can place a bet to some extent. I'm not saying you should just gamble everything you own away, but you know those deep-seated anxieties like, if this fails, I'll lose your reputation and face, or I'll lose a lot of your hard-earned money, or I'll never get another chance like this again. But if you carefully weigh the pros and cons and feel you've prepared enough, that you can't prepare any more, and the chance is finally here, you can decide to take that leap of faith. Especially for those whose natal Mars is in a very strong and favorable position and whose personal significator or Time Lord is Mars, you could take the plunge. Anyway, that is just how it is, but of course it should be guts, not recklessness. Recklessness is just blindly jumping in with nothing, while guts is going for it because you've prepared. So, if you're someone with that kind of courage rather than recklessness, your chances of winning the competition are actually very high. That's what I'm saying. Now, in Saturn on July 16th, to be precise, it's between the 15th and the 16th. Saturn meets Alpheratz, the alpha star of the constellation Andromeda. Now, the duration of this is incredibly long. Why? Because Saturn stations retrograde at the end of July, so there's almost no movement in degrees. As a result, Saturn is in an effective conjunction with Alpheratz for nearly 2 months, all the way from June 27th to August 22nd. The Saturn-Alpheratz combination isn't that bad. It's fine in terms of profit and loss, and aside from being a bit pitiful, it's okay. A defining characteristic of the Saturn-Alpheratz combination is a sort of pitiful and desperate struggle to raise one's social status, constantly squeezing out every single bit of human effort and energy just to gain even the most minuscule or tiny advantage in life. So, because of Alpheratz's distinctive and natural sociability, rather than through personal effort or achievement, one makes a continuous and concerted effort to mingle with people of significantly higher social status in a much better circle than their usual group. But since they don't have much to start with, they simply can't keep up with their high level of financial spending. They just try to create opportunities to get close to them. So you might push yourself a bit too hard for that. So it's not exactly about being hypocritical. Like, there are stars of hypocrisy like Deneb Ketos, but Alpheratz is actually a benefic star. So rather than hypocrisy, it's more like trying really hard to live life well. But the reason for this is that for Saturn to meet Alpheratz is at about 14 degrees 30 minutes in Aries. But what is Saturn like in Aries? In Aries, Saturn is in its fall. It loses its essential dignity. In what way? Like a sense of inferiority, a sense of defeat. So Aries is a sign where Saturn, gripped by a sense of inferiority and defeat, can do all sorts of nonsense, but that Saturn in Aries meets Alpheratz, which is at least a benefic star, and tries to overcome this somehow. So rather than hypocrisy, it's more like trying really, really hard. Wow, they're really struggling. So if you understand that person's psychology and look down from above, you'd think, the one below is trying so hard to climb up. You could just see it that way. But trying to view human relationships in a hierarchy of up and down is itself very typical of Saturn in Aries, Saturn in its fall in Aries. It stems from a sense of inferiority and defeat. In healthy human relationships, you don't distinguish between superior and inferior or up and down. You just become close by getting along well. But at this particular moment in time, there's none of that. Since I can't directly become a better person myself right now, I'll hang out with people who are much better than me, mingle in the same social circles and try to gain some valuable advantages from them. So it would be good to remember that this kind of pattern of investing in networking could appear within these 2 months. Now, I'll end the Chronosight Weekly Horoscope forecast for July 1st to 16th, 2026, the early part of July here. Thank you.